Located on one of the busiest trade corridors between the United States and Canada, the Gordie Howe International Bridge is the cable-stayed bridge with the longest main span in North America. Crossing the Detroit River at a gateway that handles hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods each year between the two largest economies on the continent. With a total investment of approximately $6.4 billion, the project includes two bridge towers more than 220 meters tall, a main span of 853 meters, and border inspection facilities covering hundreds of hectares on both sides of the frontier. More than just a river crossing, this is a continent-scale infrastructure project designed to resolve a strategic bottleneck that has existed for nearly 100 years within the Detroit-Windsor transportation corridor. In this video, join Mandarin Tech as we explore how the Gordie Howe Bridge is being built to reshape the flow of trade across all of North America. The United States and Canada are the largest bilateral trading partners in the world. In 2021 alone, goods trade between the two countries reached approximately $664 billion, with a large share of cross-border truck traffic concentrated along the Detroit-Windsor corridor, one of the most important logistics routes in North America. For nearly 1 century, cross-border transportation in this region relied primarily on the Ambassador Bridge, a privately owned crossing that opened in 1929 and became a critical link in North America's industrial supply chain, particularly for the automotive industry, where components may cross the border multiple times before a single vehicle is fully assembled. However, as trade volumes between the two countries increased to hundreds of billions of dollars each year, dependence almost entirely on a single crossing gradually became a national-level strategic risk, especially because the Ambassador Bridge does not connect directly to the federal interstate highway system, forcing most truck traffic to pass through inner-city residential neighborhoods before reaching the regional freeway network. It was under these conditions that the Gordie Howe International Bridge was planned as a new crossing located approximately 3 kilometers downstream from the Ambassador Bridge, intended to relieve pressure on the existing route after nearly 1 century of operation. The project moved forward only after many years of prolonged political debate and strong opposition from Manuel Maroon, the owner of the Ambassador Bridge, before the two governments ultimately agreed to proceed with a new crossing to strengthen one of the most important transportation corridors in North America. The Gordie Howe International Bridge is a cable-stayed bridge approximately 2.5 kilometers long, directly connecting Interstate 75 in Detroit with Highway 401 in Windsor. Structurally, the bridge is supported by 2 main A-shaped towers about 220 meters tall, inspired by a hockey stick, an iconic symbolic detail, as the bridge is named after the Canadian hockey legend Gordie Howe. The main span, measuring 853 meters, will become the longest cable-stayed bridge span in North America. The bridge deck is 37.5 meters wide and includes 6 traffic lanes along with a shared pedestrian and bicycle path 3.6 meters wide. A vertical clearance of 46 meters above the water ensures safe navigation for passing vessels. Both ends of the bridge will be connected to large-scale border inspection plazas. On the United States side, the inspection area covers 68 hectares, with more than 30,000 square meters of facilities and 36 inspection lanes. On the Canada side, the inspection area covers 50 hectares, with 24 inspection lanes and 16 toll booths directly connected to the Herb Gray Parkway, which leads to Highway 401. The total project cost is estimated at approximately 6.4 billion Canadian dollars, with the majority financed by the Government of Canada. The Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority is responsible for the design, construction, land acquisition, and future operation of the bridge. Because Canada is financing the project, toll collection will be carried out on the Canadian side to recover construction costs. The project is divided into 4 main components: the roadworks at the new interchange in Michigan, the United States Port of Entry, the Canadian Port of Entry, and the Gordie Howe International Bridge itself. The project officially began construction in the year 2018 and was planned to be completed after approximately 6 years of construction. In the year 2019, preparatory works for the main construction phase of the Gordie Howe International Bridge were carried out, including the treatment and remediation of contaminated land within the project area. Along the Detroit River, where the ground conditions consist of thick sediment layers and complex hydrological influences, engineers excavated nearly 30 meters down to stable geological strata in order to construct massive concrete foundations capable of supporting the two main bridge towers, approximately 220 meters tall. By December 2020, the tower foundations had been completed, marking the transition to the erection of the tower shafts using an automatic climbing formwork system, ensuring geometric accuracy and construction progress under high-elevation working conditions. After the tower foundations were completed, construction of the bridge towers for the Gordie Howe International Bridge officially began using a multi-level climbing formwork system. On this working platform, teams of engineers and workers simultaneously carried out reinforcement installation, concrete placement, and technical inspections, segment by segment as the tower gradually rose hundreds of meters into the skyline between Windsor and Detroit. Throughout this process, concrete was continuously transported from ground level to the construction position using a high-pressure pumping system through hydraulic pipelines, allowing stable construction progress to be maintained at significant height. At the top of the tower, steel anchor boxes were integrated into the reinforced concrete structure to secure the main load-bearing stay cable system, from which cable bundles extend downward to directly support the bridge deck. After reaching the designed height, the project continued with the completion of the cable anchorage system and the installation of protective tower top components to ensure stable operation under the icy weather conditions typical of the North American border region. The Gordie Howe International Bridge uses a cable-stayed structural system with tall concrete towers and main load-bearing cable bundles, allowing the bridge to span a long main span without the need for piers in the river. From this point, engineers began installing the first stay cable bundles from the steel anchor boxes that had already been integrated into the tower shafts, gradually tensioning the cable strands according to a precisely calculated sequence to stabilize the bridge deck segments throughout the balanced cantilever construction process. Each stay cable bundle was installed in stages symmetrically on both sides of the towers to maintain structural balance as the main span gradually extended toward the middle of the river. The main span of the bridge was constructed over the water using the balanced cantilever method, in which structural segments were progressively installed from both sides of the towers toward the center of the span until they met at mid-river. At the beginning of each construction cycle, cranes installed steel girders and deck beams to form the load-bearing frame of the bridge deck, after which precast concrete panels were placed into position and covered with an additional layer of fresh concrete on top to create a continuous structural system. This process was repeated segment by segment until the two structural arms gradually extended across the river and met at the center of the span, with each deck segment taking approximately 12 days to complete. The closure marked an important milestone after 18 months of construction, when the bridge deck reached a height of 46 meters above the Detroit River. The event was commemorated with the traditional topping out ceremony, in which a pine tree was placed on one of the final girders, a construction tradition with a history of more than 1,000 years, and it also marked the moment when the main span of the bridge officially connected the two shores between the United States and Canada. After the main span was closed, deck finishing works on the Gordie Howe International Bridge entered the final stage, including the placement of the composite concrete layer, paving of the roadway surface, and installation of safety barriers along the entire alignment. At the same time, engineers carried out final adjustments to the tension forces of the entire stay cable system to ensure uniform load distribution under long-term service conditions of the structure. In parallel, the lighting system, deck drainage, traffic monitoring systems, and other technical operational equipment were fully integrated, preparing the bridge for load testing before it officially enters service. The entire project, together with the border crossing facilities on both sides of the frontier, is currently scheduled to be completed and put into operation in the year 2025. In addition to the main bridge itself, the project also includes two large border crossing facilities on both sides of the frontier. On the Canadian side, A facility covering approximately 50 hectares will be constructed, including border inspection buildings, bridge maintenance facilities, and tolling systems, with direct connections to Highway 401. On the United States side, the border crossing facility will cover approximately 70 hectares and include inspection facilities as well as direct ramp connections to Interstate 75. This will be the first time a continuous, uninterrupted highway corridor is created between Detroit and Windsor. Thanks to the large-scale border facilities being developed in a coordinated manner on both sides of the frontier, the entire Detroit-Windsor transportation corridor will operate more efficiently, reducing congestion and increasing cross-border processing capacity. This completes the final critical link that enables the new bridge to truly function as a strategic connection within the North American transportation network. However, behind this strategic infrastructure advance was a quiet confrontation that lasted for years with the owner of the Ambassador Bridge, the crossing that had long controlled a large share of freight traffic along the Detroit-Windsor corridor. From the early planning stage, the owner of the Ambassador Bridge repeatedly opposed the project through lobbying campaigns and a series of legal actions. In 2012, Matty Moran spent more than $30 million to promote an amendment to the Michigan Constitution aimed at blocking the new bridge project. They argued that building an additional parallel cross-border connection could reduce the volume of commercial traffic that had been concentrated on the Ambassador Bridge for decades. Nevertheless, the Canadian government decided to move forward with the project, viewing it as a strategic step to safeguard supply chains and strengthen the stability of the most important trade corridor between the two countries. After officially opening on July 27, 2026, the Gordie Howe International Bridge immediately became a new link in the transportation corridor between Windsor and Detroit. Its 6 traffic lanes began carrying passenger vehicles and commercial trucks between Canada and the United States, adding another major river crossing route to a border corridor that has long faced heavy traffic pressure. At both ends of the bridge, border inspection facilities process customs, security, and vehicle procedures before traffic is directed into each country's highway network. The direct connection to major road networks allows freight vehicles to continue their journeys more efficiently while also reducing pressure on surrounding urban roads. The arrival of the Gordie Howe International Bridge also helps ease pressure on the Ambassador Bridge, a crossing that has handled a very large volume of commercial traffic for decades. In the Detroit-Windsor region, where factories and supply chains on both sides of the border are closely interconnected, an additional river crossing also provides greater redundancy in the event of congestion or disruptions at other border gateways. The bridge also includes dedicated space for pedestrians and cyclists, transforming the structure from a simple transportation route into a multimodal connection between the two countries. After years of construction, its massive cables and towers have now truly become part of the daily rhythm of cross-border movement. The Gordie Howe International Bridge project is not simply about building another bridge across the Detroit River. It also represents a major shift in the strategy to upgrade the critical trade corridor between the United States and Canada, a transportation route that handles hundreds of billions of dollars in goods each year. Since entering operation, the bridge has helped relieve pressure on existing infrastructure that had relied almost entirely on a single crossing for decades, thereby increasing redundancy and helping maintain the continuity of North American supply chains during emergencies. At the same time, the project creates a direct highway connection between Highway 401 and Interstate 75, reducing cross-border freight travel times and improving logistics efficiency across the industrial Midwest. In the long term, this new infrastructure also creates greater room for the development of logistics hubs, warehousing facilities, and industrial zones on both sides of the border, helping attract investment, expand manufacturing activity, and prepare transportation capacity for growing trade demand in the future. Beyond its economic value, the bridge also serves as a symbol of cross-border infrastructure cooperation between the two countries, reflecting their efforts to build a more modern, safe, and resilient transportation system capable of supporting trade growth for decades to come. The Gordie Howe International Bridge marks the culmination of a construction journey that lasted for years, where engineering ambition, economic interests, and even political disputes converged over a river less than 1 kilometer wide. From the first foundations along the Detroit River, the two towers gradually rose into the skyline, while dozens of stay cables pulled the deck segments closer and closer together until the final gap between Canada and the United States was finally closed. Today, this massive structure has moved beyond the drawing board to fulfill the purpose for which it was built, keeping one of North America's most important trade flows in motion. And perhaps the greatest value of the Gordie Howe International Bridge lies not in the height of its towers or the scale of its span, but in its ability to connect factories, cities, and economies on both sides of the border. If you enjoy exploring the mega projects that are changing the way the world connects and operates, don't forget to subscribe and follow Mandarin Tech as we continue to uncover more remarkable feats of engineering.